If you have purchased a PA 45301E or a PA 45301L, those are the early and late version of the StreetStrip valve body for the AODE or 4R70W. Today we're going to show you how to change that valve body. A couple of the things that are involved in changing the valve body are, of course, removing the filter and switching the wiring and the solenoids over. We're also going to show the removal and the replacement of the springs, the accumulator springs for this setup here and then underneath the valve body. So the first thing we're going to do, obviously we've removed the pan, so the first thing we're going to do is take the filter down and take the old valve body out. In the center section here over this plate is one set of length valve body bolts. Those will be your long bolts. On the outside here are the shorter bolts. So we've taken most of them out, but we'll show you the difference when we take them out. The outside bolts are approximately this length, and obviously the inside bolts are the longer ones. Now, this is the early style AODE 4R70W. It has what's called the soft wiring harness. And these connectors are popped off with a screwdriver. Go ahead and pop those off. And then this unit over here is a temperature unit. You must disconnect that too, or just push that out of the way. Usually it is connected to the valve body over in that corner. We'll move that out of the way. Then we'll remove the valve body. This last bolt here has a bracket on it that retains this important solenoid down here. It is very important that either the early or the late that the bracket goes back in and clamps into the solenoid down below. I'll take that out of the way. We'll switch the solenoids over in a minute. Go ahead and take it out of the way. First set of springs we're going to change is the 1-2 accumulator springs up here. You do need a set of snap ring pliers. If you cannot rent or purchase a set of snap ring pliers like that, you can skip this step. But what will happen is the 1-2 shift will not be as firm as if you were to change the springs. But if you can't change it, you can't change it. You'll remove the spring, the 1-2 accumulator piston, and the upper spring. We're going to replace those with the green and yellow springs that come in the kit. The two red springs go in first, followed by the piston, and then followed by the green spring, and then the cover. Make sure that when you put the cover back in, is that the metal section here is dished and showing up like that, facing towards you. Okay, the second part of the section where we have to change the springs, we're going to change the springs down here in this accumulator down here. And just pop that out. A lot of times this will pop out or fall out when you've taken the valve body out, but don't worry about it. We'll just pop it out now. We'll take the stock spring out and put the performance automatic spring in its place. As you see, we put the white smaller spring inside the stock spring. Pop that back in. Now, if this retainer does not want to stay in by itself, you can gently bend the 3 tabs outward, and they will tend to keep it in a little bit better. All right, let's lay the valve body down. We'll show the solenoids being switched over. Unbolt them. Ford uses several different styles of solenoids. This is the shift solenoids and the lockup solenoid here. Ford used some various styles and but they all function the same. They may be bolted down in different spots. Sometimes they're bolted down here and here. This one is actually bolted down here on top of the lockup solenoid. So we'll just gently pry this up, and then the lockup solenoid can come up after that. In order to get these back in, a little STP or transmission fluid would be a great help in getting them back in. The lockup solenoid always goes in first, and then the shift solenoids go back in on top of it. Now you're ready to put the valve body back in. When we ship the valve bodies, they do have a gasket on the back side. Make sure it is stuck on there. It may have shifted during shipment, so take a little grease or a little transmission fluid and stick the gasket back on there. You'll notice all AODE 4R70W valve bodies have guide pins. The guide pins correspond to holes that are drilled in the case. The larger pin here is the early models up to 1990, up to 1995. 96 and later use a smaller pin, and consequently the holes in the case are smaller. If for some chance you get a valve body from us and then the pins don't match the size that you have taken out, please give us a call. Sometimes the cord mismatches the cases, so you need to kind of look for that. Make sure the pins that we send you in the valve body correspond with the ones that you took out. Okay, the valve body's ready to go back in. On this type valve body, the only thing you have to make sure is that, of course, it sits flat and that the lever, the linkage, is engaged into the valve properly. That's it. Now we can put the bolts in. They're torqued center to out, about 10 to 12 inch-pounds. So let's go ahead and put those in, and we'll take a break while Gerald's putting all those in. We'll show us get that bracket in place, and we'll put this one in place so you can see how that's done. Make sure the slot here is aligned here and that the roller contacts the linkage properly there. On this bracket, it sits down around the solenoid down there and will sit flat if it's installed properly. If it is up or cocked or it won't sit flat, it's not correct. Go right in. All right, let's take a break from filming, and Gerald's going to get the rest of the bolts in. If your vehicle is a 98 model year and up, you have what's called the hard harness. This is a hard, solid plastic piece that has the wiring embedded in it rather than the loose or soft harness. If you have this type of harness, the solenoids all correspond to this. It is removed in the same way, gently pried off the solenoids and put to the side. Now, when you go to put the filter back on, if you're using a new filter, all the new filters will have a red O-ring on them like this. If you are reusing your old filter for by some chance, this red O-ring may be stuck in your old valve body. It is very important, whether you use the new one or the old one, that you have this O-ring on the filter, because you must have a tight fit with the filter. That will seal the fluid in and keep the air out. So sometimes it takes a little force to get it in there, but there you go. Well, we're going to hook up the harness. If for some chance you have put this valve body in, you start the car up and your overdrive light flashes, or the vehicle does not seem to move properly, more than likely you have misconnected or forgotten to connect one of the solenoids in the valve body. So check that first before you give us a call with any questions. Always double check your work and make sure the solenoids are hooked up. If they are not hooked up, the computer will see that fault and cause the transmission not to function properly. We're going to put the pan on. The pan is torqued to about the same, about 10 foot-pounds for the bolts, and then we're done with that.